Hey everybody, this is Big T from Bitter End Choppers, and the bike here behind me is a project that we got going on here in-house at Bitter End, and I'm just going to be giving you guys a little how-to on how to make an axle for a bike like this. Alright everybody, making the axle for this bike is really going to be pretty simple. The frame that we built here in-house is obviously a rigid frame, and the donor bike was I believe a 2002 Triumph Bonneville, and the customer here is going to be using the stock front end and the stock wheels, and obviously the motor, and we're going to kind of retrofit all these parts into this frame, and to do that we've got to make a new axle. As you can see, we've got just kind of a mock-up axle thrown in there. I believe this was the original one off the bike, but it's just not going to be long enough to do what we want to do. So what we're going to do is really pretty simple. We're going to start off with a piece of 17 millimeter stainless steel, 17 millimeter OD, and I'm going to end up cutting it down to the right specification we need. I'm going to show you guys how to properly measure for the axle length that you need, and then I'm going to end up obviously threading the ends with a looks like this is a 5/8 18 die. Alright, we got the wheel off the bike, and what we're going to need to do first before we start making the axles is obviously measure to find out how long we're going to need. So I'm just going to go ahead and measure from outside of this axle plate to the outside of this axle plate, and that'll give me the first measurement I need. If I put the ruler in here, line it up in the same place on both axle plates, and I don't know if you can see it with the camera, but it's just about 10 3/4 of an inch perfectly, which is our first measurement. But that's not where you want to cut. I mean, you're obviously going to need more length to add on your nuts that are going to hold the axle into the bike. Plus, we're going to be using these nice chrome-plated axle adjuster collars. We like to use these on a lot of different builds, and they're really a pretty nice little addition and very functional. It just slides over the end of the axle once the axle's in the axle plate, and if you can see here, there's a little notch in it that allows you to put an adjuster bolt into that notch, and you can adjust the axle back and forth, and it looks really nice. And each one of these is I don't know if you can see that here, but they're 5/8 of an inch wide. So we'll obviously need to add that distance onto either end of the axle, which is 1 1/4 inch, added onto our 10 3/4, like I said before. And I also usually like to leave probably 3/4 of an inch on the end of on each end of the axle, just for safety. Okay. Okay, so in order to make this axle to the right length that we need, we started off with 10 3/4 between the two axle plates, plus 1 1/4 inch for both of our adjuster collars, plus another 1.5 inches to make up for the threading on both ends of the axle, which comes up to us, and that's where we're going to make our cut. Alright, I took some of the 17 millimeter stock that we talked about earlier and cut it down to 13.5 inches, which is the measurement that we came up with. And it turned out to be a little bit big to fit in the wheel, so all I did was put it on the lathe, spin it, and just run sandpaper up and down it, and checked it on and off until I got to the right size that we needed for the wheel. And as you can see, it fits in the wheel real nice with not a lot of play, which is what you really want on a rear axle. You don't want it to where you really have to pound it into the wheel, but it needs to fit, really snug. So that'll eliminate vibration and stuff like that when the bike's on the road. And we'll come over here, and I'll show you that. It came out really nice as far as length. As you can see, we've got extra length on either side, and once we add an adjuster collar to either side, we'll have a nice little bit of room to put threads. so we can end up putting our nuts on the end. Also, you're probably wondering why these collars look so loose from this side. This is 17 millimeter stock, and these are come to us as a 3/4 ID, which is a normal standard axle size. So what I'm going to end up doing is take probably just some kind of piece of bushing stock, turn the outside of it to where it'll almost a press fit into this reducer collar, and then run a 17 millimeter drill through it so it'll fit tightly onto our axle and look really nice and function just okay. Like we just said before, the axle's all up to length and everything, and the next thing that we're going to need to do is thread the ends to put the nuts on. I did a little measuring with the micrometer here, and this stock is about 0.665 inches, and what we're looking for is 0.625 inches, so I'm going to have to turn about 40 thousandths off in order to thread it.
Because we're using SAE 5/8 nuts.
Correct, and that's what it has to be turned down to in order for this die to go over the stock. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so we got the lathe set up to take the 40 grand off of the ends of the axle that we need. You can see I've got it chucked up here, got the tool ready, and on our DOR, or digital readout here on the lathe, I've already set it up to where the end of the stock, as you can see here, is set at 0 on the end, and also when I end up touching the tool to the tip of the material that we're going to be cutting, it comes to 0 also. So what we'll do is I'll go back to where I'm not going to run into the piece whenever we first start out, and I'll just turn on the lathe, feed in. Probably for this first pass I'm just going to take something light, like let's say we'll do 10 grand. Since we're only taking off 40, this won't take very long, and I'll just come to where I make contact with the material and set the auto feed so I get a nice even finish, and we'll just kind of let this thing work. And what I'm going to do is on this side of the readout, as you can tell, as the axis on the lathe moves, it counts upwards, and what I'm going to go to is 0.75 or 3/4 of an inch, which is what we need to cut in order to make room for our nuts. Okay, so I'm done cutting the relief that we need in order to thread the axle to put the nut on, and it's in the finished position right now. As you can see here, it's really not much at all, but it matters as far as the material that I need to take off in order to cut the threads. And if you look up here at the readout, you can see that I've moved in laterally 3/4 of an inch, and I've narrowed the OD of the stock itself